Well, folks, it's been a wild couple weeks, and with the wild west that is the Magic the Gathering market, we're here to report to you on these cards, all these cards that got banned. We're here to talk about the financial implications of the bannings and give you our takes on if we would pick any of these cards up.
And look, it's not even just the banned cards. This has created an epicenter that has just sort of burned through the entire market. Let's talk about this.
Big thank you to all of our channel patrons that power the channel through Patreon. Your continued support means the world to us, so thank you for everything you do.
J-Controller Magic is brought to you by Card Conduit, the best place to sell your cards quickly and easily on the internet. TCG Player, the best place to buy your MTG cards on the internet. Go let the stores compete for you. Drip Shop, where you can find us live selling, auctioning, and giving away a ton of cool stuff. Go check us out on Drip Shop, and if you use that link to sign up, you're going to get some free credit to use over on the website.
And also a big shout out to Dragon Shield, MTG Stocks, and Mox Field.
All right, Jake, we've got to talk about Crypt, Jewled Lotus, Dockside, and then some cards that are on the ban list already that people are like, oh, maybe they'll give me coalition victory.
Oh no, they're talking about the banned cards again. That's right, we are. We're going to give you our take on should you pick them up? We've seen a lot of market volatility. You got highs, you got lows. You got people that are like, oh, I'm buying my Crypts now. You got people going out there buying coalition victories. You got people that are buying biorhythms, thinking that biorhythms is going to get unbanned.
Have fun.
There's a lot that went into this.
Yes. There's a lot of consistency too. We've seen these charts all do a very similar thing, though mostly the charts were like at a level and then the announcement made them crash. And then the second announcement brought them back up and everything is kind of stabilized price-wise, roughly halfway between where it was before the chaos and where it got to before there was some stability reintroduced into the ecosystem. We've seen that pretty much across the board.
You know, stuff like coalition victory, biorhythm, that's not really what we're talking about with those charts. These are just people that are buying based on speculation whenever an announcement happens. And the announcement that we're talking about is that the RC is no more. Wizards of the Coast is going to be taking the Commander format into their hands. And then people went wild. So we're actually rewinding before that, and mainly what we're talking about are Crypt, Jewled Lotus, Dockside, and Nadu is not going to be found anywhere in this video. So here's the one moment where we talk about the bird.
Later, Nadu. Sorry, nobody loved you. Three main cards, J-Lo, Crypt, and Dockside. We're going to talk about in that order because, in general, that is the order we think in which they might get unbanned. Likelihood of unbanning. Highest with J-Lo, middle with Crypt, we'll have to see. And then Dockside, I don't think there's really a chance in hell that we see this unless they just want to take a fully, like, everyone follow the brackets and don't pay attention to individual cards unless it moves you up a bracket and everything is legal. Enjoy your commander. Maybe they take that approach, but I think J-Lo, Crypt, Dockside in that order, likelihood highest to lowest of actually being a playable game piece again.
I had a friend reach out to me that said, I'm going to be able to make a CEDH deck and it's going to be a bracket too. And he was like already putting it together. I think the bracket system is going to be something that is developed and is going to take some time. Sure. So we're not going to dig in deep on the bracket system in this one.
Starting with Jewled Lotus, our basically printed only for Commander card. How could you ban it from Commander? Our cheapest copy now, Jake, is from Commander Legends. It's about $75. You can see we've got a low list on here. And that's going to happen. This is sort of a dice roll, right? Not applicable amount of sales for a rating on this store. It's just called My Magic TCG Store, which makes me nervous. No shade to this person. I'm sure you're trying your hardest. But, you know, $45, that's a nice little lottery ticket if you want to go get that. But looking at actual prices that most everybody has theirs listed for, $75 is pretty significantly down from the $90 that we were at right before, and this one is congruent with the Commander Masters regular border too.
Wow, when you look at that chart and you can just see that sell-off into the dip that absolutely got bought around 50. A lot of volatility in this card. It looks like a penny stock chart here because it's Jewled Lotus and it's a card that is just for Commander. There's no real room in it unless you have like a commander cube. I could see it being useful if you build like a commander cube. This is a great card to go into there. I'm sure some people bought from that perspective. Pure speculation as well. No real applicability outside of commander. So if you don't have one and you bought at 50, you're probably fine because it's bounced back up at 75. How are you feeling about this one, Joel? Is this a buy for you?
I don't feel any need personally to rush out and buy into any of these, because the thing is if it gets unbanned, it's probably because they had plans to reprint it, which means there'll be a reprinting and cooler, hotter, flashier scratch and sniff versions that we can go out and try and pull out of collector packs and all go, oh, when we open one. That is kind of where I fall on all of these as far as should you buy it opinion. Sure. However, I don't think that for any of these cards, you're going to run into a situation where there is some new announcement, a third announcement hits the Magic the Gathering community that makes them go further down into a lower risk area for pickup, but also maintains they might come unbanned and get legal again and be, explode, which is what you're trying to do in that mindset. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't see them being like, magical announcement that drives the price lower while also not saying, oh, by the way, we're not reprinting Jewled Lotus. That's why the price is going lower. I just can't think of what they could say to make that happen. And so at this point, if I was somebody who was like, all right, I'm going to speculate on some JLOs. I'm going to look at the foil etched version that bounced off of a $80 low, had some items sold at $41. Please don't ever panic. Y'all, if you watch any of our videos, please just let one of your takeaways be, maybe I wait a second before reacting, said the reaction YouTubers.
The bans were so out of left field that I understand the panic a little bit. It's we're going to talk about this later in the video, but there are safer ways if you are going to park your money into cards. And we're not talking about the players that had 10 Jewled Lotus or like 10 Mana Crypt and 10 artist proof Docksides that they have original art drawn on the back of all of them. This is more so for like the people that had single copies of the cards. Those people weren't hurt massively by this. If you had a Mana Crypt, a Jewled Lotus, Dockside, you probably weren't hurt massively by this entire thing.
We're talking about the person that wants to take a chunk of their paycheck one week and go get themselves something special. Is it safe to buy this, or is this going to get reprinted or like fall even further and I can get a better price? That's really the question we're trying to answer. If that was what I wanted to do right now, was go get one of these, and I'm going, is the risk low and can it be any lower? I would go, the risk is as low as it's been in a while. I mean, look, 133, it's at 117. And
that's
the risk
what we
is
talk about all the time on this channel is low risk, right?
That's it.
We are always trying to help people find low risk. And so it's like you are buying from a price that was definitely lower than it was.
Correct.
The issue is I'm trying to think of the scenario that does drive the prices lower is if like Wizards of the Coast came out and said explicitly, look, we're going to adhere to these bans.
Right.
We're sticking with the bans.
That's the risk. That's the risk you run with any of this speculation is it gets fully banned and the price tanks. That's your one side. And the other side is it gets unbanned and you got a cheap Jewled Lotus during the interim times. That's the question you have to ask yourself.
Right.
Are you willing to lose, this probably goes down to like a $20 novelty card, $30 novelty card, depending on the variation that you're looking at. If it gets fully banned, is $80, $90 worth of risk a bad proposition to you to maybe get?
So I would be looking at all-time high price or pre-ban price.
Exactly.
And then looking at any sort of opportunity there.
175.
I don't think
for this one.
Yeah, because if, for example, Wizards of the Coast says, hey, these cards are staying banned, well, then there's no reason for them to print them again.
True.
Even into a secret layer. So from that perspective, having one for like a Commander Cube or something like that, a house game, I think my takeaway would be that I'm probably not buying a lot of these. I'm looking at the opportunity to add maybe one or two to the collection,
right,
if I didn't have them. So like speaking as somebody who has Jewled Lotus, I don't have this version. I don't have the etched version. I don't have the textured or the borderless version. It's tough, man. it's hard for me to make a decision on if I'm buying this. I'm thinking probably not, even though I do think that there is some opportunity there.
Right.
If it does get hit with an unbanning.
When you're looking at a card like this, it's gorgeous, right? This is the Alana Richards art borderless version, currently around 115 for your listings here that you're seeing available for purchase. The high was like 155 in February since it was printed. Your borderless textured is the same art, different treatment. High here around 500. Over 500 at some points, nearly 600 touching in May, April. And now you're down to around 425 after a real hard dip. Somebody sold theirs for 175 major. Oof. Couple of O's in that oof, brothers. That's a tough one. I look at a card like this for 400. I look at it. This wouldn't be the version that I personally bought anyway. If I wanted to buy like a super blingin' version, I'd go for this one because it's under that $200 mark. I love a card between like 100 and 200 if you're really going for like a sick treatment thing. Like I really want
version.
Right, exactly. I really want that Lumra from Bloomborough that's got the gilding on it. I've just been watching that price from like the 180s get down into the 140s, and man, around that 120, 130, I'm thinking of pulling the trigger.
Yeah.
This is the kind of card that I would super go for, but that example right there is the point. I would rather right now spend that on a card that I know is not gonna get banned ever. I've got a playable piece forever, and I'm not gonna go speculate on this because if it does get unbanned, you're telling me Thanos isn't going to have an Infinity Stone that says Jewled Lotus in little tiny letters under that? You think telling me that's not going to pop up? Come on.
Something worth bringing up is a lot of people were talking about CEDH breaking away from actual commander. You're putting a lot on this thing happening that may or may not happen.
Right.
But from that perspective, if you were like, no, I'm in the CEDH community, like I know that eventually what's going to happen is it's going to break away from actual commander. If you were like super hardcore about that feeling and you just for some reason were like, yeah, I'm gonna place my bets, then all of these cards from that perspective would be good pickups right now. Not saying that that's going to happen. I'm just saying if you were like, no, it's an inevitability, Wizards of the Coast is going to continue,
if you feel sure
whittling away at it, and you felt a certain way, you're like, no, these are definitely going to come back because they're format staples. I don't know. So we've seen a lot of CEDH takes and CEDH players that have really embraced these bans that are honestly fine with it. They're into the format shakeup. There was a lot of outcry because people felt blindsided, but now people have started to digest these bans. I know that there's some people that are just sick of them that are like, no, I hate these bans. They're terrible. I mean, there's really not much you can do about it other than, ticket. I guess you could go out and protest.
No, right, exactly. And we're not talking about that. We're just talking about the financials. We're not talking about opinions anymore. They've all been said 1,000 times. Our CEDH friends really like Mana Crypt in their decks. And so this is one that they were like, Mana Crypt and not all the others? Right now, Jake, Eternal Masters, this is your cheapest version here. We've got $120 here, kind of settled out, $115. You're seeing actual sales. Again, here we go. Here's somebody dumping. Here's a 106.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've seen 100s pop up.
Yeah.
I think that this is pretty typical behavior. You may have somebody who has a lot of them, and then what they want to do is they want to undercut the market, and they're probably doing it like a card at a time. They don't want to flood the market with hundos. They want to undercut the 138s and get quick sales on these.
Exactly.
This card is pretty low risk at 100. In my opinion.
100 I really like a lot because that feels like the price that they wanted to keep this card pre all of this chaos was like it gets reprinted, dips down to 85, goes back up, right? Yeah,
and back in the day, EMA was a great set because Force of Will had a lot of value. Mana Crypt wasn't even the big pull in that set. Mana Crypt was a great pull in the set, but Force of Will was a ton of the value in there, and then Force, having been printed a lot, has kind of fallen to the wayside. But yeah, dude, I mean, 200 was where this was because it's a format staple. Casual players wanted it, CEDH players wanted it. The dip is massive. You have 200 down to sub 100, which is more than a 50%.
Some sales for $60. Woof.
Dude, that's a massive drop. If you got it 60, you're pretty happy right now, even if this is just going into a cube or something. Now, the reason I like this one more than Jewled Lotus is because it's a card that can go into a cube. It's a fantastic card for cube. it's a fantastic card for if you want to have Rule Zero. This is a great card as well.
This is like one of the easiest one as far as I'm concerned to Rule Zero into whatever sitch. If anybody was sitting down at the table with me and we would generally decided we're going to play some of our more powerful decks, I'm not going to turn a nose up to somebody going, yo, Crypt's in this deck, by the way. Is that cool? I'm not going to be like, ugh, come on, man. You know,
I've always thought it was a fair card. Like, I get that it leads to explosive starts, but the 3 damage to you on the flip, you know, Mana Crypt can do some serious damage to you. I've had it kill me before in a game. Masterpiece
Mana Crypt. Wanted to take a peek at this one. This one took about $100 hit. It was in the 800, 900 range. You can see very low liquidity. This is a card that it being sold can move the entire sort of market price on it. You can see 1, 2 items sold, 2 item, 1, 1. You know, like just in July here, these 2, 4, 6 that were sold moving our TCG prices here, just because this card doesn't move a ton with between hands. Roughly 800 to roughly 700 now, picking up a copy. You know, like you're gonna have these, and now's like, if you want to watch it like a hawk, if you're interested, you should be, really, because these are the ones that you might want to take your risk on. If you're gonna take a risk that we did not tell you to take, we would never advise you to take a risk like this. We're just showing you what some lower risk options might be. All-time high, $1,486.97.
Because of how many masterpieces came out of Kaladesh, a lot of people were just punished opening those boxes if you didn't find these masterpiece cards. And you may have looked at March of the Machine and saw Ragavan get this treatment, and you saw like a couple other cards get this like border. These cards are so different than those recent, you know, versions that were printed in March of the Machine. These were beginning lottery tickets before the variant era. So most of Kaladesh is worth nothing because of how many of these boxes that were opened. You had cards that were good, like Mana Crypt and Soul Ring, and a handful of other cards. And then you had stuff like the Gear Hulks that were printed and all these different kinds of things.
Look at Paradox
Look at
Engine.
people buying Paradox Engine, anticipating a unban. Like, that's just shenanigans.
That's hilarious. We just accidentally found this chat while we were shooting this video. That's so funny that Paradox Engine is exploding right now to just further illustrate our point of all the chaos going on.
But these cards are actually rare. I believe that these cards, like, when you are looking at like a Mana Crypt and you're like, oh, you know, what is the hot Mana Crypt that I can get? There's the 17A from LCI, which is engineered to be extremely rare. And then you have the one from Kaladesh, like we're talking about now. Yeah, like I'm not paying 15 grand for that. And then the market price is 3,500 underneath it.
Yeah,
like,
it's kind of ridiculous. That price is there because the only one that is for sale
10.
is a pristine 10 that's been graded. And so this one is on the insane side and not applicable. You can even look at the 1 year. This card doesn't move. There's just not enough data to establish a good price on this one. Looking at it, I mean, it's still the most expensive. It's only gone up in price, probably will remain that way. Down from that, you've got your other inks all the way to a promo one. And then you can start looking at your OG around Market 204, your borderless. This was our 0017 special guest, the first one in the lineup. This one took a $50 hit, and that's it. Like I said at the beginning, you can see it was confident, it died, it bounced back, and now it's in a holding pattern. That's so consistent across all of these cards.
Masterpiece, one more time, is like that to me. As a long-term collector, that's where my low risk is, you know. Knowing that this had an all-time high of, you know, 1,500, whether or not that price is accurate. Let's just say the MTG stocks price was slightly inflated and this had an all-time high of 1,000, which is easily an underestimation, right?
Yeah.
Probably had a realistic all-time high of like, you know, 1,200 to 1,400. And then knowing that this was recently as high as 800 to 860, I'm looking at a card that is very good, highly desirable, one of the early variants that are, you know, really hard to come across. This came out of like 2016, I believe. This for me is like the low risk zone where I'm paying a lot of money, but the risk is still low because it's a highly sought after card in a special variant.
It's kind of a hint at the final point we'll make when we look at some other cards that have been affected by this. But asking yourself when you're looking at a card as a financial safety, it's like we're not talking, again, major investment of all your primary money. Is it safe to buy this? Ask yourself, is the card itself reprintable, which Mana Crypt is, but is that treatment then reprintable, which this version is probably not. We haven't had it explicitly said. It's not reserve lists or anything. It feels like this is not a reprintable card to look like this.
And especially if it does go away forever, there's going to be people that are like Jake and Joel, you know, $570 for the near mint version of this right now. You know, I'd rather park that money in a Tundra or a Bayou. Yeah.
You should.
That's fair.
Not arguing that.
That's totally fair. Yeah, go get a Trop instead. Go get a heavily played Underground Sea.
Hell yes.
You know,
please.
But if you've always been like, man, I love that card.
Exactly.
Well, then yeah, you're probably happy to buy it around 570. If you bought it at 800 before the ban, you're probably pretty ticked off. But, you know, if you're buying it at 500 down from an all-time high of, you know, 1400 or 1500, well, then you're probably not going to be too upset.
And that's really the question that we're trying to answer as we look at everyone's favorite Goblin Pirate here is, if I specifically do want to buy these cards, is it a safe time or not? What's the risk? I hope that that message is coming across very clearly, that that's the questions we're trying to answer. Commander 2019 version of Dockside, Jake the OG. Over the year, down 42%. This is a card you can see looking at that year chart. Up, 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 up. It's never falling, never falling. Whoops. $20.
It's hard for me to. Oh yeah. This one for me is the highest risk of all, because I think it was a card that was on everybody's watch list.
Yes.
It's a feels bad card too.
Dog, if they had come out and just said Dockside Extortionist is banned, everyone would have applauded and none of this would have happened. I'm very confident with that. Very confident saying that.
A lot of people would have been fine with this.
Yes.
We've talked at length.
Dockside and Nadu. I feel like we don't have to mention Nadu, but I will mention Nadu. Dockside and Nadu. Nadu had to go.
I'll make sure to cut you mentioning Nadu out. No, Dockside is one of these cards that is, once it's introduced at the table, if you are playing at a high level, everybody's using their clones, their phantasmal image, their whatever the clone is from Doctor Who, to make their own Dockside, or they're reanimating the Dockside once it dies so that they can get all of the degenerate Dockside stuff.
Flickering it. Yeah,
flickering it. The CEDH players, it would become Dockside the Gathering as soon as the card was there. I remember asking Dylan over at Play to Win, like, when you tutor, if you don't have Dockside, how often are you going to get Dockside? And I remember Dylan saying he's like a large amount of the time. Most of the time he's tutoring to go get Dockside. I do think that just because of how game breaking this card is, the treasure doesn't even enter tapped. This one for me is a hard avoid. I just don't see
the market agrees with you. You can see the market. It has nowhere near the same amount of bounce back that the other cards had. Most of the other cards recorrected to halfway in between the floor that they bounced off of and where they were. This one, barely. Nobody really wants to take the bet on this one, because if you had to put some chips on what card's going to stay banned, this is going to be the first one out of everybody's mouth. This is the 2x2 borderless version with the quill, you know, keeping a little ledger on top of the boat here. This is down to around $50. 47 near mint, trusted sellers, $50, no shipping. It was above 110. Your base copies here from the double masters, but then your foil etched, this one was around 170. This one's corrected the least, down to just 150. And so I think mostly people were like, well, I mean, I've got it. I'm just going to hold on to it now, see if anything does happen. Yeah, I mean, I feel like people are hedging against this is still the coolest version for a cube, and it's still the most powerful card in your cube. And
it's not a bad cube card. So like even this card in comparison to Jewled Lotus, right?
Right.
This card compared to J-Lo, in a cube, you're going to have people playing tons and tons of mana rocks. So Dockside in there is honestly, I don't hate it, because it doesn't even have to be a commander cube. It could just be a power cube or something like that. I even know people that have the banned cards cube,
right,
where they like to put all of like the most broken stuff in there. And I think like this card in there can really thrive. And, you know, people like to pimp out their cubes. So like stuff like the etch thing and, you know, the borderless, like we were just talking about, those are going to be really attractive for those kinds of things. Now people aren't playing cube all the time. I'm sure some people do, but it'll never be as expensive as it was in Commander. It is very, very high risk, and I do agree with you, Joel. Like, this will be the last one unbanned. If they said, hey, we have to unban 3 out of the 4 cards that were banned, people are going to say, okay, Jewled Lotus, Mana Crypt, and Nadu all come back. Dockside stays banned.
Dude, if Nadu gets unbanned before Dockside, I've got problems.
It's just one of these cards, and it feels bad because I do think red needs some help sometimes. It doesn't even get, the best removal and stuff. It has to be paired with other colors a lot of the time. It just doesn't answer everything very well. So having Dockside was good for red, but it was just broken for the game.
Really briefly wanted to look at some of the foils of cards that have been on the ban list for a long time. Lots of people talking about cards like Biorhythm, cards like Coalition Victory. You're seeing foils of this card. The liquidity on this one is a huge problem because you can see recent sales, market price $30 for the foil, but the only ones listed are around $100, $200 because people are just sort of going nuts on these. So the call on this would be
extremely high risk.
Don't. This is so reprintable if they do unban it. This is so like a nothing burger.
But that invasion foil, Joel. It's invasion.
Look, that's around 7th edition foils. Those foils and older are sick looking in some cases. And so I'm not saying it's not going to be the best looking foil in your entire collection if you go spend this money. I'm just saying that it's money that doesn't need to be spent. This is a super high risk, super inflated hype price right now, sort of across the board with all of these. And so obviously in general, we would say avoid.
You have to keep in mind that the triomes and the, well, they're not called triomes in Capenna, but all of the different rooms, Jetmir's Garden,
the lounges,
the lounges. Yeah. All of those cards help mitigate Coalition Victory's costs. And a lot of people in our Discord were talking about this one. Shout out to Food Time. And I think Food is right on this because he's like, yeah, sure, it wins the game, but it's a really boring card. And I tend to agree.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of boring. You can kind of see like...
Yeah. This one in particular, I don't think there's any chance it gets unbanned. I'm just saying that people are like going nutso to try and acquire these right now, and I would not do that. If anything, selling your foil of this, it's probably a great time to do that.
I think that's an excellent takeaway from this. Imagine if you were somebody taking all of your time to acquire foil Coalition Victories, and then you finally get this piece of news that sends that card 3 or 4x.
Easy.
And it doesn't even say, hey, it's getting unbanned. You just have this crazy news that has spiked the price of the card. The card is still banned, but now it's going up in price. I can't think of a better signal to get me to sell.
Sell.
And the same is true with stuff like Biorhythm, which we've seen people, that Onslaught foil has spiked in price.
Damaged foils, heavy play foils going for 36 of a card that says each player's life total becomes the number of creatures he or she controls. Y'all, this is not playable. You can't have this card in our format. This doesn't work. Yeah. It's stupid.
You just ramp to it in green, play a bunch of tokens, and then kill people by
play one
casting an 8-cost
token.
thing.
Wipe the board, play one token, create one token, and then play this? Dude, no.
It's not a fun card, which is why it doesn't exist.
You could probably get,
which is why it banned.
I mean, depending on the quality here, you could probably get $30 or $40 easily for that foil right now, and it's not coming unbanned. This card here, mark this, clip this, tell me in 10 years, this is not getting unbanned.
There is a lot of speculation. This kind of reminds me of when Wizards of the Coast banned all of the cards that were considered culturally or racially insensitive.
Right.
And people went out to go, acquire Crusade and Imprison and Invoke Prejudice and, that list of cards. And there was all this speculation, because the cards are going away, they're never going to be reprinted again. A lot of them are reserve list anyway.
Right.
But people were like, I have to acquire these because they're never coming back. This is different than that. Obviously, none of these cards have any sort of reason to never be printed again. Speaking to Dockside, Jewled Lotus, Mana Crypt.
Right.
They could end up in a secret layer. There could be a secret layer that's like, hey, we wanted to include a big high ticket item like Mana Crypt on there just because. I do think there would be community backlash even if they did put Mana Crypt into a secret layer and it being an expensive card that people could acquire for cheap, people would still feel out a way to be mad about it, because they're like, well, what can I use this in? I can't even put it in a commander deck. Whereas the racially insensitive cards, it's like, okay, well, those are obviously never coming back in any capacity. So it is like an apples and oranges kind of thing.
I have noticed a lot of far-reaching consequences of this, not just cards that are banned or haven't been banned or might be banned or might be unbanned, but looking at the reserve list as well. I mean, looking at this card, Underground Sea, which is kind of our high water niche mark for the dual lands, you're looking at a 22% rise over the last year just in general. But most of that you can kind of see from like April to like September-ish. It was kind of leveled off at around 700. Seems like that was a really a big pressure point for the market, was not going too far over that 700 mark for a light play copy of Underground Sea. But now, since September, you can see we've got this rise in price, and now it's starting to crest and go past that 700 mark. I think that not only over the last year has there been an increased interest in reserve list and a little bit of a furor over it with all of the new players and potentially big money coming in, looking at the big collecting side as a part that's had a spotlight on it from a couple of different creators this year. But now you've got speculation of stuff being banned or unbanned, and so people are also doing this with the reserve list. I mean, the high water mark, Underground Sea, look at your low water mark, a Plateau, over the last year, up 17% year over year. But in the last 6 months, kind of down 7%. But hang on, September, boom, we got a 2% uptick. And so it's like they had started sort of leveling off, maybe even dwindling. I think that this is all just causing more attention on what I have in my collection, what I don't have in my collection, what I want to buy, and what's a good price, what's a good risk for that card. I'm seeing a lot of stuff with reserve list too.
And because of power creep, I don't even see the reserve list as something that's like a big threat to the game. I know people complain about the reserve list. They're like, ban the reserve list, get rid of it. For a long time, you know, we've been pro reserve list despite not having a lot of the cards. It gives the game clout. You know, having big expensive cards to point to that weren't just printed as like an extremely rare variant in 2023. You know, looking at that Mana Crypt 17A that's like $3,500 just because of engineered scarcity, right? These are cards that are old. They're hard to acquire. You don't need them in most situations. If you want to run a Gaia's Cradle, I say proxy it in your deck if you're playing high power. You know, the power level keeps cards like this out of casual formats. If you're trying to play off your deck as casual, but you're running a Gaia's Cradle, shame on you.
Come on, yeah.
Yeah, I have a Cradle and I don't even run it in anything. It just sits in a semi-rigid top loader. Stuff like this, you know, people kind of taking their money back to reserve lists, you know, looking at the people that had 10 Jewled Lotus, 10 Mana Crypt, all those people that had, you know, X amount of these cards. Yeah, that money could have been parked in these, and you could see none of these cards really had any sort of effect from the bans. Stuff like Mox Diamond, it's a CEDH card.
Yeah.
You don't need it for anything else.
Over $500. It's dipped a little bit in our last month. It started ticking up. You can kind of see prior to all this, maybe there was a little bit of a pullback because it's been roaring so much this year. And now you've got them into a situation where everybody is looking at the money in the game. Everybody's looking at what's legal and what's not legal and making bets. And I think that we've been pretty clear about where we would risk, what we wouldn't risk, what is the lowest risk to buy right now. You know, JLo, Mana Crypt, Dockside in that order would be my call in a vacuum for the likelihood of getting unbanned. And like Jake said, CEDH codifying itself, making itself into a true thing, having a, you know, RC or whatever they call it that everyone will rally behind, and we can see actual ramifications at tournaments, I think is a big part of that. That could cause price movement. But then the only other thing is going to be WotC announcements at this point. I think, like I said, announcements that kick the can may cause more chaos, but I don't think that you're really going to see true settle until Gavin and team go, here are the brackets, here's the list. We call it the oopsie poopsie list, or we call it the this is hard banned, we're going to come around and burn all these cards list, right? There's a lot of air in between those two, but some outcome from them directly is really going to be the only thing that finalizes, do these prices go up, do these prices go down?
I'm sure that people are wondering from Jake and Joel, hey, are you guys buying any of this stuff? Is there anything you're interested in? Joel, you got anything?
For me, no. Right before all of this chaos happened, I had just made the choice to liquidate a large portion of my reprintables from my catalog, from my collection, and turn those into 10 duels. That is kind of still where I would be. In general, I think it's a good time right now in the booster fun era. If you're going to actually want to like park money and not just buy a cool card that's $20, we're talking about, I want to buy some sick ass treatment or some old card that's $400. What is the safest place to do that where I can avoid what happened 2 weeks ago happening to my cards? I would still say, bro, just go buy duels. Go buy lands or mana from the reserve list that are legal in Commander. That is where I would be going. Outside of, I'm going to go buy that sweet new Lumra treatment that's 130 just because I want it. I want it, and I want it, and that's enough. If you just want it, that's so enough. That's so enough. We're just talking about risk. That's it.
I would pick up a Mana Crypt just because I don't have one.
I think that's
and
a safe
sold
move.
all of mine ages ago.
One of those, one of Jewled Lotus. I would entertain that idea.
I have Jewled Lotus, so there's no reason for me to go after that card. But for Mana Crypt, there is part of me that's like, you know what? I would like to have like a foil Mana Crypt just for a binder.
Yeah.
And I know that seems kind of silly just to like have one to have one.
It's a collector piece.
But yeah, if it isn't getting reprinted again, you know, that kind of thing, we could see those extremely sought after Mana Crypt versions go up in price. But
yeah, and that's a good caveat. I'll repeat it. I said it earlier, but if this does get unbanned and you do end up in a situation where you need a Mana Crypt, there will be another reprint. This is not your last chance ever to get a Mana Crypt if it's coming unbanned. Like Jake said, there's no chance or point for them to reprint it if it's a banned card. We won't ever see Nadu again, probably.
You see a lot of names that are scrolling. Those are our patrons at the $10 level or higher. We appreciate all of you so much, and we do appreciate you as well, the subscriber. We've talked a lot about these cards. I know it was hard to give a definitive, like, solid answer because it's still pretty fresh since these bannings happened.
Yeah.
But we have had a lot of people reaching out to us saying, you know, hey, is it a good time to buy any of these cards? Should I pick any of these up?
Which is understandable.
People in our Discord that were buying, biorhythms and coalition victories and that kind of thing.
Rock and roll, y'all.
Good luck to you. Godspeed.
we love you.
Don't agree with it.
Maximum blessings, though. All blessings.
Maximum
full blessings. All blessings. Yeah. Let us know if you can summarize in the comments what you think our opinion is.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.
See you on the flippity.